as well.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. And I want to thank Dr. Diaz and Mr. Muhammad for speaking today. And over the number of years that I've been in the central office, we've been very, very deliberate and explicit to work with our community partners to hold us accountable, to get better at what we're doing. And as we built this workshop, again, at the request of the board about how are we working with Infusion, my hat goes off to this team who on a regular basis is working with a number of our partners to build this workshop. They worked with the department to let them know about this presentation that was going to happen. They provided input. They were going to talk about the input that they received from the community, where we need to go further to get better at what we're doing when it comes to Infusion. So we have Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Diana Fetterman here. The team in the Office of African American, Latino Gender Studies, Brian Knowles, has been doing a lot of work here in the couple of years that he's been up here at the central office. Ms. Trejo has built a lot of relationships in just a short time with our community partners, and for a long number of years, I think back to when I was a principal in the district. Ms. Carter has built some, again, great relationships when it comes to the infusion of Holocaust studies. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fetterman.
Good afternoon. So as we go into our infusion workshop, for these three particular facets of the statute, we're going to focus in on the parts of the statute and the resources that the team provides to teachers in order to ensure that infusion is taking place inside of our classrooms. We're going to focus on the professional development that we provide to teachers to make sure that they have the knowledge base in order to carry it out. And then we're also going to share the feedback that we've received from community members and organizations around their feelings on how Infusion is going so far. Because we know that as far as we have come in this work, we can always get better and do more, and we want to make sure that we reflect the input from community and do that. When we share the courses that we have available, I want to make sure that we share both aspects. Because although the team has done a great number of work in ensuring that we have elective courses open in our high schools in order to delve deeply into this work, we also, though, focus on Infusion, and that's coursework that's embedded in all of our courses to ensure that all of the students in Palm Beach County have access to this rich information. Mr. Knowles?
Yes. So I'm going to start off with speaking on the section of the mandate of the statute about African and African American studies. So this section of the mandate explicitly states that we should have instruction that includes the history of African people before slavery. So we want to make sure that we're shifting away from this narrow scope that is traditionally taught about the history of African people beginning with slavery, to understanding and developing an understanding amongst our children and also our staff and district personnel that the history of African people extends further than that, that it also predates European imperialism as well, that you have a rich cultural history that existed in Africa before European influence. And most importantly, that we're infusing and also integrating all of these pieces in this instruction, just not within the social sciences and not just only in history, but we're also including this in all subject areas across all disciplines. The scope and sequence. So this one specifically comes from the African and African American history courses. But this right here is the foundation of the entire curriculum. And just like I say, this reiterates the premise that our history is much deeper than just slavery. Traditionally, when we're talking about the Eurocentric narrative of African people, we usually try to begin with the triangular trade and the Middle Passage. But this history goes a lot more deeper in depth than that. And just the line itself that says that the content will include, but is not limited to, West African heritage, the Middle Passage, and the triangular trade, the African diaspora. Just understanding that the history itself predates European imperialism and European influence, like I said before, but also the history itself also extends globally. Also, so what are we doing as far as in curriculum? First of all, that we make sure that we infuse supplemental resources that are inclusive of African diasporic people in all subject areas. This is not just confined within the parameters of a social studies class. To make sure that we include in these materials and all schools and all students have access to materials that include this within every subject area. Also, African American read alouds that reflect state standards, that we're always continually updating those read alouds and also adding to those collections and making sure that those read alouds are reflective of the state standards. And also infusion of African and African American history in our CKLA domains as well. And secondary curriculum. Just again, to make sure that we infuse supplemental resources that are inclusive of African diasporic people in all subject areas. That we're working, our team not only just does not work in isolation, that we promote a culture of collaboration, that we're working with other team members within the curriculum department and making sure that we're developing curriculum and lending resources and creating access to resources that include the history of African people, not only, just like I said, in social sciences, only in history courses, but all disciplines, all subject areas, that every single student in every single school throughout the district has access to these instructional materials. In addition to that, I'm proud to say that out of these, we have additional courses that are standalone, that address African and African American history. But 3 out of those 5 courses actually are courses that were developed within the office over the past 2 years. Among those courses are the great men and women of color who shaped world history. Also another course, examining the African American experience in the 20th century through music and visual arts, exploring hip hop as literature, African American history, and we also have African history. And as you know, there's a number in parentheses, and that number indicates how many of our high schools are offering these particular courses. That is not limited to how many sections of those courses are offered, but that just states and indicates how many high schools throughout our district offer those particular courses. As far as professional development, I just want to highlight a few points within this to make sure that we'll always have ongoing professional development and training and support to our schools throughout the district, and that's K through 12. And that support can come in a variety of forms to make sure that we're adequately teaching the mandate within all schools. Also, we've done professional development at Teacher Fest, making sure that we're explaining and expounding on the state statute to our new and incoming teachers. Also, we did in October, actually in early November, closing the achievement gap, teaching African American history in our schools, which was done in collaboration with actually Broward County Schools and also the state task force. Also, we've also developed a collaboration with a partnership with FAU's College of Education. And we've actually hosted our first professional development with them over the past weekend called Intersection of Ethnicity, Religion, and Gender in the African Diaspora. In addition to just that professional development that we did in collaboration with FAU has also been working with this team to go into school sites to also support our teachers as well. In addition to each year, our office hosts something called the African and African American Studies Summit Institute. We have it each year in June. And matter of fact, this year will be the 25th year of hosting that particular event. So working with our community stakeholders, which is extremely important. So when I went when I started developing this workshop, all of us went out to our community stakeholders, who was an extremely important piece of what we do. So we framed it asking our community members is like, what can we do to support the community, and also how can this community support our particular work? So there was a general consensus within most community members that professional development in African and African American studies should be something that's a requirement for all administrators and all teachers. In addition to continued vocal support from district leadership about the critical need for infusion, and also the understanding and respect of the mandate. Also implementing a verification process, because we do have the instructional materials, and teachers do have access to those materials, but trying to come up with a verification process that ensures that our teachers are actually using and utilizing the materials. In addition to an engaged African and African American studies contact at each school site that receives a stipend and has principal support. And what this contact would do is serve as a liaison between our team and our department and each school site, and also that liaison would disseminate information and also support that particular school site in making sure that infusion happens on that particular campus.
The Florida Statute 1003.42 also highlights the infusion of Latino Hispanic studies, which is the infusion of Latino history and the representation of Latino cultures into the curriculum, which is vital to the academic success of our students. We are pleased to share that the School District of Palm Beach County continues to lead in supporting diversity and equity in education for all of our students. And we're also pleased to share that the district continues to support the improvement of academic achievement for all the students and ensuring that the statute is adhered to. At the high school level, we do have a Latin American history course that is offered. The scope and sequence focuses on the chronological development of the Latin American people by examining the history and culture of the region with an emphasis on the Caribbean Basin, Central America, and South America. Our students are being exposed to the historical, geographical, political, economic, and sociological events which influence the progression of Latin America. With regard to our elementary and secondary curriculum, there is Hispanic Latino contributions that are highlighted that are made to the United States through our interdisciplinary curriculum. Latino and Hispanic reader aisles are being implemented that reflect the state standards. There's an integration of Hispanic Latino studies beyond the social sciences and the development of the curriculum with regard to having culturally responsive curriculum that pertains to our Hispanic Latino learners. At the secondary level, as I mentioned, we do have our Latin American history course. With regard to our professional development, it is ongoing. We are providing training and supports to our various schools. We did do the Teacher Fest, as Mr. Knowles alluded to earlier, as well as the Leaders Learn and Grow. We are offering our supports as well at our assistant principals meetings. We were very fortunate enough to serve as panelists for the 2019 Race to Equity Summit, which was the Facing, Embracing, and Leading with Equity. And we also did with the collaboration with FAU, as Mr. Knowles mentioned as well, with the focus on the African diaspora, but also with a focus on the Afro-Latino. And we are having our upcoming Summer Institute as well, which is the 7th annual Hispanic Latino Summer Institute. I commend our Hispanic Latino community stakeholders because they have been so involved and continue to do so. They were very delighted to be able to provide feedback. From their perspective, they actually would like to see professional development in Hispanic Latino studies. They believe that it should be a requirement for all administrators and teachers. They also believe that there should be a mandatory attendance of principals and assistant principals at the Latino Hispanic Summer Institute. They'd like to see more hiring of bilingual district level administrators and teachers, more vocal support from leadership about the need for infusion targeted to schools and community. They also like to see the implementation of Hispanic Latino studies content rubrics in the district test book adoptions and required cultural sensitivity training. As we know, the social emotional learning aspect continues to be very important. So they do believe that our teachers and administration, it will help them to better understand the culture of our students.
Good afternoon. Holocaust Studies is Part G of 1003.42. And it reads, the history of the Holocaust, 1933 to 1945, the systematic planned annihilation of European Jews and other groups by Nazi Germany becomes a watershed event in the history of humanity, to be taught in a manner that leads to an investigation of human behavior, an understanding of the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping, and an examination of what it means to be a responsible and respectful person for the purposes of encouraging tolerance of diversity in a pluralistic society, and probably the most important, and for nurturing and protecting democratic values and institutions. The scope and sequence for Holocaust studies pertains to the study of the Holocaust, which I will repeat, the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. The course and the scope and sequence covers from the rise of the Nazi Party through the consolidation of power and the systematic murder of European Jewry. Additionally, the course covers the persecution of other groups during the Holocaust era. Finally, the course provides students with the tools to become upstanders and advocates of human rights. And that's probably one of the most important parts of the scope and sequence. For our elementary and secondary curriculum, we have a K-5 curriculum which involves the teaching of empathy, friendship, caring, loyalty, standing up for each other. The programs include, but are not limited to, the Sneetches. We have a puppet show, The Brave Little Boat, the rescue of, that was the rescue of Danish Jews as a nationwide effort, and Hannah's Suitcase, which actually turns out to be one of our most popular programs. And that shows artifacts, and we implement critical thinking. The 6 to 8 curriculum is the beginning of this very difficult history, and it's taught by the use of novels and projects. And I will say that we do have 2 schools teaching Holocaust studies, 2 middle schools teaching Holocaust studies this year. The 9 through 12 curriculum is covered in social studies, ELA, and the Holocaust Studies Honors elective. The elective covers the history of the Holocaust and the study of anti-Semitism, which is so important today with the increase in our society. The programs consist of Holocaust survivor speakers and prejudice-reducing presentations. Students do projects to infuse this history with the relevance to today. They make a connection. Grants from community partners include a trip to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. For professional development, thank you. Professional development, we have an online course from Echoes and Reflections, which is a collaboration between Yad Vashem, ADL, and the USC Shoah Foundation. And that has been fairly popular this year. We've had quite a few teachers go through it. We have learner fellowships from the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. And the learner fellows travel to New York City and study a week with renowned historians from Columbia University, or at Columbia. There are district workshops from understanding what the definition is of Part G to the Nuremberg trials, to asking the questions of whether justice was served for crimes against humanity. Teachers learn how to bring students, and this is the key focus, safely in and safely out of the Holocaust, because it is so difficult. Community stakeholder perspective is that partners have stated they would like more support from district leadership in the requirement of Holocaust education, and the community would like to see mandatory professional development of our teachers and staff on the history and pedagogy of the Holocaust. They have also requested accountability from the schools for enforcement of 1003.42. Thank you.
As the team has shared, our resources are available in Blender, and at any time, of course, we are happy to walk the board members through where those resources are. And then, of course, we are working with the company that provides us with Blender to get more and more updated metrics so we can really see how many teachers are pulling each of those resources and in which schools these teachers are. Thank you.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. I'm so glad to go first because my questions are so basic. I really enjoyed the Race to Equity Summit. I enjoyed your presentation. I was so glad that I got to be there and hear. You really were very inspiring to me, and I felt like we were so lucky to have such a leader in the community doing that presentation for us, so thank you so much for that. The question that I have, I think this department is so important, and I love the work that you're doing, but to me, I kind of envision that the state has a test, and these are the questions on the test, and these are the things we have to cover so that you pass the test, and then over here are all the things that we want our children to know because we feel it's important for their life. And so these two things are kind of going back and forth and pushing as hard as we can. So enlighten me, just because I only come from my own experience of classrooms, if I learned all of these things, how does today's education look different if I'm just in a regular world history class or just an American history class? How does it look different? Have we really gotten to a point where any of the questions on the tests are tied into the subjects that we're covering? Or are we not there and we're just trying to put those things in and then also teach kids the test on just those basic classes, not our specialty classes?
So to be honest, true infusion, which is the goal, I think, of our entire team, and then I'll let our team members, if they want to add in any specifics, but true infusion is it's infused. It's not, here's what we're going to teach, and then we're just going to add on this. It's infusion. It's we're truly adding in a part of it, because this is our history, our literature, our work, our stories. So it's what we teach together. So when we are reading, so in our literacy work, when we do our reading work, we're reading literature, we're reading stories, we're reading informational passages that truly reflect the perspective of all of our students. So that is truly that work that we're piecing in on, but my colleagues.
So if that's the case, then why is it so difficult to really infuse this in?
One, it was the development of the content. So I think we've gotten much better at it. We have more content that teachers are accessing and actually using. In regards to your question about the testing, the tests that are developed can come from any content area. So any of these content areas kids could and do see on our state assessments. So the infusion is even that much more important because they will have this content. So I think it was the development over time of having these resources and our teachers having access to it.
So, okay, last question. If, let's just be hypothetical, my kid gets all the way through high school from where she sits right now at 5th grade. She's going to get through high school in a few years at some point. Will she come home if she doesn't take any of these specialty classes, will she ever come home and tell me something about African history? Yes. Really?
It's infused. The infusion part.
Do you want to talk about how how Blender works, Mr. Knowles?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've done, and I'm going to kind of specifically address the question about state testing, because that was one of my concerns. If the state tests, if they're not testing particular areas, our teacher's going to touch on it. So what I did, for example, for U.S. history, there's an EOC exam. I pulled all of the standards that were going to be taught that was going to be addressed in the EOC exam from African and African American history. And I created resources to make sure that, okay, if you're going to teach to a test, that you're going to have these particular standards that do align with my content area, and there are additional resources, an abundance of resources. So if you go in Blender, for example, under U.S. history, there's a whole website that I created with tons of resources that address the standards from the U.S. history EOC. In addition to, we don't just look at just the content standards, we look at the skills that should be taught at each grade level. And what we're doing is we're teaching the same skills, but we're just replacing the content that are being taught to those skills.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you, and I'm choosing my words very carefully. But first, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all the work that you do. I have to say that, Ms. Carter, you do a tremendous job. I think part of the problem is not enough staffing. Be very blunt. We need more staffing doing this, and I want to thank Mr. Oswald for working, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but with the Gross Family Center for the study of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. But I have to tell you that Holocaust education is an uphill battle. And I'm not going to mention names, but I am going to tell all of you something that there was an issue here in a school where a leader made a statement that to people that said that some people do not believe in the Holocaust, that it existed, that it occurred. This is a school leader in a high school. And it was construed by the Jewish community to mean that he didn't believe that the Holocaust ever happened. So how do we infuse, and I know the district thinks that they've addressed the problem, but it was a while ago, and the community has now reached to me. And they're talking about getting the Anti-Defamation League more involved, which is not a bad thing. It's going to help us. But we need to make sure that our leadership understands the importance of infusing all three components that we're talking about today, whether they believe in it or not. And if you're in a school with a Jewish population, you don't ever make that kind of comment because there's no way to heal it. And it's unfortunate, and it may come to us. And I'm sorry to bring it up, but I'm sitting here, and I just can't sit here without saying it. I do want to thank you for everything you do. The Gross Family Center they've drafted a letter, as you know, and they're saying that they're concerned that too many students are graduating without the required Holocaust education that is Florida law. And they are offering their services. I would imagine that in the Latino community, in the African American community, since we don't have the staffing, we need to embrace these people on the outside and let them help us. The one thing our district is doing is, with the help of 10, they're recording some of the survivors of the Holocaust so that we will have films that we can show in the classrooms. But this is going to be one of those issues where we need to have the village involved. And so I thank you. I know we're short on staff, but we have to find a way. It's been in existence for so long, and our students are just not getting it. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I have to thank the staff of 3. This is a big district here. You do a great job in trying to cover this whole district. I've spoken to all of you, and I really know that we've got to improve what we're doing. We say that we're infusing, but there's truly, really no real accountability. When we talk about professional development, the community, your recommendations from the community says it all. There's a lot of work to be done, but people are willing to help us if we invite them to the table. And after this meeting today, I hope that we will invite them to the table to come up with some ideas to help us. When you think about it, it's not happening in the schools. I'm in the schools all the time. It's happening piecemeal, just like you heard, through electives, through social science, and a hit and a miss, but we're really not doing what we need to do. And I know it's one of those unfunded mandates that comes down to us to implement, but it's important that we all know our history. And as a result, as a community, we can come together to help the school district. And I've had the conversation with Mr. Oswald, as well as all of you, as well as the community leaders who are calling me saying, what are we going to do about it? You say you have a scope and sequence, but that's true. I can't pick up anything right now and really follow the scope and sequence for Palm Beach County school districts as it relates to these programs to say that you're really doing it. So we need to kind of face it and come together and begin to look at where we're missing the beat, and let's get it done. So it's obvious the recommendations from the community are absolutely great. They have the trainings. I've gone to the trainings. The people aren't there. The leaders aren't there. I mean, it's been going on for years and years and years, and we've just kind of played that game. But it's time for us to stop. I was just at the Equity Summit last week, and we're talking about our history. Our children don't know our history. We brought a wonderful speaker out to Lakeshore last Friday talking about our history. The kids didn't understand what the speaker was talking about. The same things that we're talking about, we're teaching through our program right here. They have no clue. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we can't just do it with the 3 people here. And Dr. Fanoy, we've got to do better with trying to put together a better larger number of people to help us out with the whole district, almost 200,000 children, 185 plus schools or more, and we've got a lot of work to do. But I think the community will come and help us if we allow them. So I think today was a good start with letting people speak, getting the input for this workshop, and the next step is let's get our meetings together to see where we go from here. Thank you.
Dr. Fenoy.
Thank you, team. Somebody raise their hand. I'm sorry.
Mrs. McQuinn, go ahead.
Well, I wasn't quick enough. Well, plus I had to decide if I really wanted to ask the question.
It's your age, Mrs.
I do.
McQuinn. Don't worry about it.
When we get so many, the board, when we get so many email invitations to go to different cultural, educational seminars, et cetera, I would love it if we could have, I understand all the different things, but I would love to have my own calendar of, Barbara, these are the meetings that will educate you on all of these pieces. For me as a board member, what will give me the most bang for the buck with my time, and then I will know ancillary things I want to go to. But I'd love to know the ones that really we're sponsoring and that you think I would get the most out of.
Yes, ma'am, we'll be able to get you that information. Mr. Chair, if you're ready.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. McQuinn, though I'd like to know that same information. So,
Okay.
Mr. Mohammed comes here every meeting and talks to us about this, and it seems like, you know, it's time for us to figure out if we're doing it or not doing it. So,
You want me to go on?
Yes,
Sure.
I just kicked that. I'm over here trying to deal with this cold. So, you know, we've had people who have done tremendous work in this area for 25 years, right? Debbie Range and Margaret Newton had all the lessons and the listing of, you know, 9th grade social studies. Here's chapter 3, you can infuse this. What we need to get with is, why don't teachers want to do it? It's not that we don't have the information. Now, and you know, just to go to a personal level, I give the Black History Fact every month except in February. A couple years ago, I was told I was racist because I give a Black History Fact. I'm trying to get people to understand that there is, in fact, more to our history than, you know, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, right? But if we really mean this, then we're going to dig in. And part of this has to do with the work around like racial equity and SEL, because that's why people are pushing back. When we put the, years ago, 10 years or whatever, when we put the, on the world history, the American history exams that the district started creating, and we put questions from African and African-American studies on there. And somebody actually wrote to the newspaper and they published it and said, why do we have to teach Black trivia? So that's what we need to get with. It's not, I mean, yes, we could get more staff. I would love to have more staff doing this work, but we need to get with why people have their own stuff and they won't share it. And they won't see people for who they are. And if they're saying Black trivia, then how are they treating Black children? See, that's the frightening part, right? My hope, and I ask this like twice a year, is can we find a way to stop spending money on instructional materials and instead spend that money on building out Blender? Because if we built out Blender, we could put everybody in there, right? And then the teachers could use Blender and just work through Blender. But, you know, the state ties our hands to some extent on that too, right? But I'm you know, okay, I don't feel well. I don't feel like happy talk today. And we need to get with why individuals are resistant to sharing the contributions of all these groups of folks, right? Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. At this time, we will move on to our last workshop for the evening, which will undoubtedly spark another conversation.